Hello neighbor, this is Curt at eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Westin Grate Step Nerf Bars on our 2024 Toyota Tacoma. Now, if you have any experience with the Westin Grate Step, please leave it in the comments below. We'd love to share your experience with other neighbors in order to help them make the best decision for themselves possible. Now, the Grate Step is made completely of steel, so it is a very heavy-duty step. It's going to be 6 1/4 inches wide, and it's got these really aggressive serrations across the top that stick about 1/4 inch high up. It's going to do a really good job of getting the excess mud and snow off of your shoes or boots before getting into the cab of your truck. Now, the length of the Nerf bars are really going to be dependent on which vehicle you have and how far they need to reach across either one or both doors on your vehicle. The bracket kit is also going to be custom depending on which vehicle you have. Now let's take a look at this on the truck and see how they look. So that 6 1/4 inch wide width is going to be plenty for really just about any shoe or boot size. You get a really good grip across the bottom with those serrations, and again, they're going to do a great job of scraping any excess mud off of your boots. The length that we have for the vehicle, and this was the recommended length for this particular truck, is definitely enough to cover both doors, plus a little bit extra, so you have a little extra room to scrape off some excess before you get in. There's not going to be any liquid building up on this at all either, because the serrations are open, so any kind of liquid can fall through that. And it's a really good look on this truck. I really like the rugged type of look. It gives it more of a work truck or outdoor off-road type of feel, which if that's the look that you're going for, this is a great recommendation. Now, one of the things you may notice about these aesthetically is that you got a bit of a gap here between the vehicle and the top of the step. It doesn't create a very factory or OEM look, but frankly on Nerf bars like this, I think having that extra add-on kind of aftermarket look is really appealing. It really just kind of makes it look like you're accessorizing this truck to handle those tough workplaces or those outdoor adventures that you might go on. Now let's go ahead and take a look at exactly how we got these installed. So the first thing we're going to do is take our passenger front bracket, which is easily identifiable because it's at this angle, plus it has the stamping on it we discussed before. And each bracket is going to require 2 of those hex bolt assemblies that we showed you. And I've got my 13mm socket wrench. Now the first thing I'm going to need to do is remove the existing bolts that are under here, which are located at an angle here and here. On our passenger side is going to go with this next set of bolts here. There's no angle to this as far as the bracket goes, so they're just going to go on pretty directly. Now, what you're also going to find is that the next set and the next set after is really going to be dependent on the type of vehicle and the type of running boards you get as far as which of these sets to use for your third passenger side bracket. If you have a shorter cab, this is likely the set you're going to need to use. If you have the double cab, this is the set that you're going to likely use. It could also be dependent on the type of running boards you get, but these are going to go on the same way, regardless of which one of these you end up going with. And we're simply going to need to repeat this same process over on the driver's side. Now we've got our first rear mount installed on the passenger side, but something that we noticed as we were taking the Toyota bolts out is that the Westin install guide is going to let you know that you need a 13mm wrench for the bolt heads, which is true of the bolts that come with the bracket kit. However, the Toyota bolts that we're removing, we found out are actually 12mm. So 12mm, well, this is the 13mm. You can see how loose that is. That really gave us a fight as far as getting these out. So get yourself a 12mm wrench as well for the removal of the Toyota bolts. You will need the 13mm, however, when we install the bolts from the install kit. Now that we've got our brackets installed, let's go ahead and see how the Nerf bar itself is going to mount onto those brackets. So the first thing we'll want to do is go ahead and turn it over. And what we'll notice under here is that it's going to come with 3 different sets of these bolts here that are actually going to be what fits into our brackets. Now, out of the box, you may notice that these are very stiff. You really can't move them. That's because our 4mm hex wrench here is going to be inserted into the end of that. When these are tightened down, it actually tightens the bracket in so it doesn't slide back and forth. That's what's going to keep your running board from sliding forward and back while you're traveling. So the first thing we'll need to do is get them loosened up. And it doesn't take a whole lot of turns on this to get them loose. Loose enough to move anyways. And once we have that loosened up, we should be able to slide the bracket pretty easily. Now we can move it into position to exactly where our brackets are located before we thread the bolts through and get them attached. Now that we got that loosened up and we can position it freely, the next step we're going to take before setting it actually on the brackets is going to be to put this plate on. Once we have that in place, it will mount on your bracket as such. At which point, as you can see with those ovular holes, we'll be able to position it closer and further away from the vehicle this way. And once we have it on there and in a spot that we like it, we can go ahead and do our bolt assembly as such, and then tighten it down using our 13mm socket wrench. Now, we don't want to tighten it down completely because we want to leave some maneuverability just to tweak it and make sure it's perfect. The last step in this installation will be torquing the bolts to 15 to 18 pounds. Now, I had mentioned that the vehicle that we have today only requires 3 brackets for installation. But if you have a running board that requires 4 brackets, they do give you the parts to assemble that into your Nerf bars here, and we'll do that as such. We'll take this plate here, insert it in. Next will be this L-shaped plate here, which we can insert in right there. What we'll then do is take these 2 bolts. Now, make sure that when you're doing this, you're putting the closed end down. Remember, this is how we tighten and loosen these brackets, so we want to make sure that the end that's going to accept the hex key is up on the top. We're going to go ahead and thread those in as such. And we'll be able to tighten those down once they get into the correct position and putting that 3rd plate on. Now, the reason that we showed you how the brackets went on up on the table is that, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to get under here and show you exactly what we're doing. So being able to see that up on the table, that's precisely how we put it on. We simply turned it over with the bolts facing downward. We left them sliding and loose so that we could position them into the mounting bracket holes. At which point, once we had the length adjusted to where we wanted it, and from here we're basically going from door seam to door seam. This one actually fit this truck very, very well. Once we had the forward and back adjusted the way we wanted, we went ahead and took our 4mm hex key and tightened down those bolts that were in there to keep it from sliding back and forth. After that, those ovular holes that could move the Nerf bars toward or away from the vehicle, we actually have them on this vehicle positioned all the way as close as we can. We think that that really, with the profile of this vehicle, didn't have it sticking out too far, but also had plenty of room to get your foot on. Now that we have all that on and tightened down and adjusted the way we want to, the final step we have in our installation is going to be getting that 15 to 18 foot-pounds of torque on each bolt. Now, there are 12 bolts on each side of the vehicle. And we had mentioned earlier that this is the last step. So now we're going to just go through and tighten each one of those down to that 15 pounds. And once that's done, we should be ready to roll. So with the installation complete, you can see that it might be a little bit tough for one person to do. I was able to manage doing it on my own, but getting an extra set of hands is always helpful. So overall, this is a really great high functional step It's going to be fantastic for you in those really kind of messier conditions outdoors. So if you do a lot of off-roading or camping, or if you work job sites where you got to deal with a lot of dirt, mud, snow, things like that, these are really nice, rugged, durable Nerf bars that should last you a very, very long time. Once again, this is Curt at eTrailer. Thanks for stopping by.